In the early years of the 20th century, the United States was in the midst of rapid social change. Cities were swelling with new arrivals, and ideas were spreading faster than ever before. In the African American holiness movement, believers were seeking a deeper spiritual life, longing for something that could break through the barriers of tradition. It was in this environment that Lucy Farrow emerged, a quiet, unassuming woman whose ministry would touch the very heart of what became the modern Pentecostal movement. Born in Virginia sometime in the mid-1800s, likely into the final years of slavery or just after emancipation, Farrow's early life was shaped by both hardship and faith. Details of her youth are scarce, but by the early 1900s, she had settled in Houston, Texas, where she pastored a small holiness congregation. Those who knew her spoke of a deep humility and a prayer life that carried a sense of God's presence. Farrow's life took a pivotal turn when she became acquainted with William J. Seymour, a young African-American preacher with a growing hunger for the things of God. Their friendship grew in the holiness community of Houston, where believers often gathered for prayer and Bible study. Around 1905, Farrow accepted a position as a governess for the family of Charles Parham, a white holiness preacher whose ministry emphasized the baptism of the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in tongues. It was during her time in Parham's home that Farrow herself experienced what she believed to be this baptism. The experience left such a mark on her that when she returned to Houston, she began to share the testimony of what God had done for her. Seymour listened closely to her accounts, and her words planted seeds that would shape his ministry in the years to come. In early 1906, Farrow left Houston to visit family and friends in Los Angeles. She arrived months before Seymour, who would later become the leader of the Azusa Street Revival. At the time, Los Angeles was already home to pockets of Christians praying for revival, meeting in homes and small mission halls. Farrow joined one such group and quickly became known for the way she prayed for people. According to accounts preserved in early Pentecostal newspapers and memoirs, when she laid her hands on believers, many began to speak in tongues instantly. The meetings where she ministered grew in intensity, with testimonies of renewed faith, physical healings, and spiritual visions. By the time Seymour arrived in Los Angeles, the ground had already been prepared by Farrow's quiet but powerful ministry. Her role in the first days of the Azusa Street Revival was foundational. While Seymour became the public face of the movement, Farrow was often in the background, praying for people and encouraging seekers. Those who encountered her described her as soft-spoken but filled with spiritual authority. Unlike many preachers of the time, she was not driven by ambition or personal recognition. Her concern was that people would encounter God for themselves. In those early meetings, there was no elaborate order of service, just a gathering of people hungry for God, where anyone might speak, sing, or pray as the Spirit led. The presence of God, attendees said, seemed to permeate the room. Later in 1906, Farrow accepted a call that would take her far beyond the shores of America. She boarded a ship bound for Liberia, carrying the Pentecostal message across the Atlantic. This made her one of the first missionaries of the modern Pentecostal movement, and certainly one of the first African-American women to take that role. Reports from the time, printed in early holiness and Pentecostal periodicals, told of her preaching the gospel and praying for believers, many of whom testified to receiving the baptism in the Holy Spirit. The conditions were challenging, and the journey itself was long and exhausting, but Farrow's sense of calling drove her forward. When she returned to the United States in 1907, she continued to travel and minister wherever doors opened. In the years that followed, Farrow's ministry stretched across the United States. She preached in holiness churches, small Pentecostal gatherings, and home meetings. She laid hands on seekers, told her testimony, and encouraged others to pursue a deeper life in the Spirit. Her approach was not flashy. There were no grand campaigns or large buildings, but it was effective. Many of the men and women she prayed for went on to become leaders in the growing Pentecostal movement. Her influence was multiplied through their ministries, spreading far beyond what she could have accomplished alone. By the final years of her life, Farrow's health was declining. Even so, she remained committed to prayer and ministry. Friends who visited her recalled that she was still eager to encourage others in their faith, even when she lacked the physical strength to travel. She had lived through an era of deep racial division in America, yet her ministry had crossed racial and cultural lines at a time when such unity was rare. Her life was a living testimony that God could use anyone, regardless of gender, background, or social standing, to accomplish His purposes. Lucy Farrow passed away in 1911, leaving behind no personal writings, no large organization, and few photographs. What she did leave was a spiritual legacy carried in the lives of those she touched. Her name may not be as widely recognized as some of her contemporaries, but in the records of early Pentecostal history, she is remembered as the Apostle of the Laying On of Hands. It is a fitting title for a woman whose ministry was marked by the simple but profound act of praying for others. Today, more than a century after her passing, the effects of her ministry are still felt. The revival she helped ignite at Azusa Street gave birth to a global movement that has reached every continent. Pentecostal churches, whether in small rural towns or bustling cities, can trace their spiritual heritage back to those early days, when a handful of believers gathered in prayer, seeking God with all their hearts. Lucy Farrow's story reminds us that the history of great movements is often written not only by those in the spotlight, but also by those who labor quietly in the background, faithfully sowing seeds that will bear fruit for generations to come. From the worn floorboards of a Los Angeles prayer meeting to the far coasts of West Africa, Farrow's life was a journey of obedience and faith. She did not seek recognition, yet her influence spread around the world. In a time when opportunities for women, especially African American women, were limited, she stepped onto ships, into pulpits, and into living rooms with the same conviction that God still moves among His people and that His promises are for all who believe. Her life, though largely unrecorded by the world, remains a significant chapter in the story of modern Pentecostalism, standing as a quiet but enduring flame in the fire that began at Azusa Street.